Hello and welcome to the Subscribers Logbooks, where we discuss the history of the various parts of the Risk of Rain universe. Today's entry is all about the one whose soul is still left on the planet, the Huntress. Huntress's bow was strung in version 0.30.6.0 of the Risk of Rain 1 beta alongside Acrid, where she turned heads with her unique strafe ability. In Risk of Rain 1, every character must hold their movement whenever they want to attack, or stop and pop as they say. Huntress is unique in the aspect that she could also use all her offensive abilities while on the move, making her very good at kiting enemies. Her primary ability was Strafe, a straightforward arrow shot that did 140% damage. Her secondary was Laser Glaive, where she would hurl a glaive which would hit a target for 300% damage, then bounce off to up to 4 different enemies, each bounce increasing the damage of the glaive by 30%. Her utility was Blink, in which she would warp a very small distance in front of her, based on her movement speed. This could be used both as a dodge, a way to cross gaps, or a minor speed boost to fight the clock. Finally, her special ability Cluster Bomb consisted of her sticking an explosive to an arrow and launching it for 320% damage. But the kicker was that upon contact, the arrow would drop 6 small bomblets that would deal 80% damage each. Upon getting the item Ancient Scepter, her special ability would upgrade to the MK7 Rockeye, named after a real-life cluster bomb mind you. The upgrade doubled the number of bomblets that would drop, increasing it from 6 to 12. In the beta, Huntress was unlocked by default, but in the 1.0 launch they made it so you unlocked her by getting 15 monster locks, meaning she could be the first or the last character you ever unlock. It all depended on those nefarious internal dice rolls that we like to call RNG. In the patch 0.30.7.0, Huntress would get an increased attack speed coefficient on Strafe, going from 0.25 to 0.29. She got 4 more HP per level, and now she would also gain 2.5% attack speed upon leveling up. Huntress will remain a relatively strong striver in the eyes of the community for over a year, until the version 1.2.0 patch, where she took a major hit to her damage output, as Strafe's damage got reduced from 140% to 120%. Though the tooltip did not show that before the version 1.2.0 patch 6 days later. Also, they fixed Strafe's hitbox in version 1.2.3, almost a month later. Not much is known about Huntress in Risk of Rain 1. Thematically, Huntress was always an interesting character, as one would wonder if she went to the planet on her own behalf to hunt down some prey, or if she was also on board the UES Contact Light. Given the developer's comment on how not every striver was canonically on board the ill-forsaken cargo ship. One could even wonder if she was on board at all. What had most stumped was her curious helmet and the blink ability. The former had the eyepieces above one another rather than next to each other. If this was purely a stylistic choice or a hint to Huntress being a different species is up to speculation. In the Risk of Rain universe, teleportation is often considered nothing but a naive fantasy. But here comes Huntress blinking all over the place. The blink is labeled as an actual teleport in the game's tooltips, making the origins of the Huntress rather curious as to how she manages to do this. Is it an innate ability, magic, or some sort of experimental technology? Maybe she's just moving really fast. Risk of Rain 1 is a game made of ambition, passion, love, and unexpected support. Therefore it is only natural that a lot of content would be cut, but luckily there is a ton left in the files. A huge thank you to the cutting room floor for compiling it all in such a neatly manner. Apparently the Huntress was supposed to be able to switch to some sort of dark form, where she would gain 4 new abilities. No code remains for the abilities, but we do have the sprites, which are all labeled as Huntress 2. Which does not really tell us much apart from their basic functions, being a primary attack, secondary attack, etc. Allegedly you could stack the third ability, akin to how you can do so with Engineer's Minds or Handy's drones. The fourth ability would most likely be the one to switch between the two forms. On screen right now you can see my attempt at reconstructing the Dark Form Bulk cycle and attack animation. One can wonder why they didn't revisit this concept in Risk of Rain 2. Speaking of the sequel, before we move on to the Glaive Slinger's incarnation in the second game, a word from our sponsor. Before Risk of Rain 2 would release, Hopo Games would have these dev blogs on their Tumblr where they would show work in progress footage, discuss the game, answer questions, or in general just muck about. Someone asked them on the 2nd of July 2017 if Huntress was going to be in the game, to which they replied that she was planned, albeit reworked. We would see what that meant on the 13th of February 2018. Hope would demonstrate their brand new sprinting function that they would be adding to Risk of Rain 2 to compensate for how slow it could often feel to travel in 3D environments. In that same post we got to see Huntress for the very first time, though gameplay of her would not be shown till Devblock 10 on the 9th of May 2018. Here we got to see her special attributes. The first one was that she would automatically lock on enemies with her attacks and that she could sprint while attacking. On the 9th of May 2018, the developers cleared it up by describing that her aim lock was her unique ability, but to compensate she would have the shortest attack range of all the ranged survivors. Huntress was one of the survivors that had made it to the early access launch, and her unlocking condition required you to get the third stage and beat it without perishing. A much more hands-on requirement. Albeit Risk of Rain 2 is a rather different game, the numbers remained very similar and she retained a lot of the same base stats. She now got more health regen and damage per level, at the cost of getting less health per level and no longer gaining the 2.5% attack speed upon leveling up. Strafe now did 150% damage, bringing it higher than its Risk of Rain 1 glory days. Laser Glaive lost some kick, now only dealing 250% damage, and each bounce increasing the damage by only 10%. The trade-off was, however, that the Glaive now bounced 6 times rather than 3, making it far better at crowd control, and also just far more satisfying in general. Her utility is once again the blink. And while it still does scale with movement speed, the base teleportation distance was increased to a more substantial level. You can now also teleport across the Y and Z axis, and not just the X. Finally, the cluster bomb arrow would not return as her special, as it was now replaced with arrow rain. She would blink into the air and shower an area with constant arrows dealing 330% damage per second, and slowing anyone within the area, making it so that anyone caught in the rain would struggle to get out. Funnily enough, for a move called Arrow Rain, it would often struggle to hit aerial targets. Over the year of early access, Huntress would go on and receive 3 alternative abilities. The first 2 got introduced in the Skills 2.0 update from the 17th of September. By collecting and carrying 12 crowbars at once, you would unlock the Phase Blink, a variant of the blink where you would teleport a rather short distance, much like the first game. But the caveat being that you could hold up to 3 charges of the blink, allowing for a far more erratic and flexible form of dodging, at the cost of raw distance. The alternative special ability would be unlocked by starting and completing Rally Point Delta without falling below 100% HP, or hiding in a corner while your friend clears the stage if you have no honor. This proved frustrating to most players as they would have to restart a run if they got Scorched Acres instead. The Lunar Stairs were introduced in the same update to help combat this and other achievements. They would allow you to change the next stage in the Bazaar Between Time by paying 3 lunar coins. The achievement got changed to just account for both stages, however, in the Artifacts update. The ability unlocked for Troubles was Ballista, and had the Huntress blink into the air to shoot up to 3 arrows. You could stay in the air for quite some time before the game would force you to shoot out all the arrows, though staying completely still in the air for too long is a great way to make yourself a clay pigeon with a record low life expectancy. The Purple Clad Artifacts update would introduce the rare alternative primary skill. If you manage to make the initial hit and every bounce of the glaive kill an enemy, you would be awarded with the Flurry ability, where instead of shooting a single arrow, Huntress would spend some more time drawing her bow and unleash 3 arrows that all dealt 100% damage each. The unique thing is that crits still double damage in the sense of releasing twice the number of arrows, a rather fresh design decision making this ability more visually impacting and satisfying to use. If you are curious about the statistical differences between these 2 primaries, the number crunchers of the community have got you sorted out. They have essentially evaluated that Strafe's better proc coefficient makes it more suited for stacking items that have a chance on hit, and for bursting down opponents with items like Crowbar, while Flurry does scale a lot better over time with critical hit chance. Getting to the obelisk and obliterating yourself while playing on the Monsoon difficulty, or normal difficulty according to Risk of Rain 2 community, will reward you with the Arctic skin. Great camouflage for Rally Point Delta, not so much for Scorched Acres. Our Judge, Jury and Executioner would receive her first buff in the Early Access Hotfix patch number 3731106, where Arrow Rain's proc coefficient got increased from 0.1 to 0.2. This just made it a bit more reliable on proccing on hit items. The Scorched Acres update made her Arrow Rain area of effect taller, so it might actually hit aerial opponents for once. A lot of love was given to Huntress in the Artifacts update. Both special abilities went from having a massive 17-second cooldown to a more manageable 12. Strafe also got an increased fire rate, going from a shot every 0.6 seconds to 0.5 seconds, and the travel speed got doubled. This update touched up the visual indicator of Strafe's crosshair. More importantly, the hitbox that Huntress would latch on for the beetles got moved from the chest to the head, so Huntress could target the beetles while they were climbing up from the earth like every other character can, instead of just sitting there and waiting for the spawn animation to finish. Huntress is one of the characters in Risk of Rain 2 that has a character log, and while it may seem decently lengthy, it mostly just lets us know that she's a very competent bounty hunter. Maybe she was never a hunter of animals, and instead a huntress of humans? Nah. The same questions regarding her helmet and how she can teleport remains unanswered for now. This is where Huntress's story ends. She has remained a rather popular character throughout Risk of Rain. Her unique strafe and auto-aim abilities in both games have made for a smoother entryway for many players. This has been the Survivor's Logbook, over and out.